Hello and welcome to something a little bit different. So I've been toying around with the idea of making a tier list for a little while, and the Isle is no stranger to tier lists. You've got dinosaur tier lists, you've got dinosaur YouTuber tier lists, dinosaur political alignment chart tier lists. We've got a lot of them, okay? But something that nobody's done is an Isle soundtrack tier list. And the Isle has a very interesting and overall very good soundtrack. So I thought, okay, you know what? Let's get on that. How hard can it be? The answer is very. This just trying to find all of the different tracks for this game was a task in and of itself. So I had to look on YouTube because I couldn't find it anywhere else. Luckily, there were two playlists that had the vast majority of the Isle soundtrack in them. In fact, one just had a ton from Evrima and nothing else. Meanwhile, the other had a ton from Legacy plus everything in the Evrima playlist. So, those helped immensely. But then there were a ton of little tracks scattered around all over the place that I had to do like a scavenger hunt to try to find. There were some I found just on tiny YouTube channels, and these videos only had like 100 views or so with these tracks, and it's the only place I could find them. And then you had others where there were these official bits of the soundtrack that I could only find on the website of one of the composers, and they were definitely tracks for the Isle. And then you have the curious case of one specific track, which I'll get to much later, which I don't even know if it's an official part of the soundtrack. It might just be fan-made, or it might not be. I don't know. But yeah, it was just a whole thing in and of itself. But right now, in front of me, I have, I believe it's 51 tracks to go over. So alright, I've added in the 2 extra rows I needed. Gonna start from the bottom towards the top, so from worst to best. And the way that things are gonna work on each individual row is that the leftmost is the best of the tier, and the rightmost is the worst of the tier. So starting off, we have Battle Music 1. And the only version of this I could find has the main menu background noise over the back, which is pretty appropriate for this horrific F tier track. I hate this thing. I hate it. It doesn't fit in with the rest of the soundtrack at all. It's just grating to listen to, and just in-game, it'll also loop into itself and cut off at random points, or sometimes just get stuck forever to add to the annoyance. It's awful. It is actually awful, and the only singular track worthy of F tier. Which is a good thing too, because if there was a single other track that made it into F tier, I would have to make a tier lower just to put this piece of garbage in. I can't stress it enough. If this was removed from the game, just entirely, nobody would care. We would rejoice if it was gone. Nobody would miss it. And anyone that did miss it would be put in an insane asylum, as they should be. Just awful. Like, it has the drums and like the little like, I don't even know what they're called. Just, yeah. No, not good, doesn't fit in with the rest of the game, awful, F tier, goodbye. And now we move on to E tier, which is a bit of a weird tier to have. All the tracks in this category are more ambience than music tracks, but I couldn't not include them, as some are categorized as music and other ones I found and didn't want to leave out. But the things in here, they're not as much music as they are ambience, so I have to put them in this weird limbo. Like, they're not bad, but they also don't deserve to be in D tier. They're not bad enough to be in F tier, but they're not good enough or even enough of a track for me to really consider them for D tier. And the first track to see in this weird zone is Arima track 9. Now, this track just has some low, droning noise, a tiny bit of Morse code, which is nice and interesting. There's a few of Arima tracks that have that, they're rated a bit higher. But other than the tiny bit of Morse code, which links it to a couple of slightly better tracks, there's kind of nothing here. It's just okay, some spooky ambience, but nothing else really, so it's just sitting here awkward in E tier. Next we have the awkwardly named Soundtrack 1. Which I only found on a small YouTube channel that posted this. Wasn't in any of the soundtrack playlists I could find. And this one, once again, it's more ambience than music. Like, it sounds like cave ambience, actually. So maybe this would sound fine in a cave, that claustrophobic kind of feel to it, the crumbling rock sound effects, but it's not really a track. You know, it's not music per se, so it's sitting here in E tier. And next we have another awkwardly named one. I believe I found this in the same place as Soundtrack 1. The Isle Intro. And I believe this is not the actual name of this track, but it's the closest I could find. And this, once again, it's got some eerie noises to it, some unsettling stuff going on. I believe this is found in some promotional material for the game. Like, it's definitely familiar, though I haven't heard it in-game. I think this plays, or at least the very end of this definitely plays at the end of a couple trailers for the game. So it's not bad, but I can't really categorize it with other tracks. So it gets the honor of topping out E tier. Now moving on to D tier. D tier is for songs that just don't hit. Like, they're not necessarily bad outright, like F tier. It's just that they have something off about them, or they have a job and they're not really doing it all that well. They're not really that pleasant to listen to compared to everything else. So they've got to be sitting down here in D tier. And starting out, we have the very appropriately named track 13. which it has a good build-up. It starts out fine. It has this real intimidating sort of rumbling build-up, like, ooh, something's coming. And then it just goes insane. Then it just decides that while the rest of it was super quiet and subtle, now it's gonna start blaring horns, drums. It's just so loud. This plays at nighttime, and it doesn't make you scared. Like, if you're brand new to the game, oh, sure, it will scare you a little because, ooh, what's going on? What's around me that's causing this crazy soundtrack to play? And then you realize it's nothing, and then this track is annoying. It is so annoying because you can't hear what's going on around you. That's the only bit of fear that it adds, is that it completely deafens you. Like, the loud bits are so overwhelming of the rest of it. This is at the bottom of D tier. If there was any track that was going to try to give Battle Music 1 a run for its money, it's this one. This thing, it was close to F tier. It is so close. But the track itself, minus the volume issues and such, isn't as egregiously bad, so it is teetering on the edge over here at the bottom of D tier. And up next in D tier, we have Carnivores. Which is a track you can tell is from the very early days of the Isle. It has this kind of feel that some early tracks have, and it just doesn't hit right. It has a lot of elements. It has the like choir in the background, which you see in a lot of really highly rated tracks later. So this is something that has some key elements. It's got the kind of clicking noise that you have in a few other really good tracks. It's got a lot of elements in it, but it just doesn't hit the spot. Compared to a lot of their soundtrack, it definitely lags behind. And one strange thing about it, okay, I can't be the only one. I hear this track, and I think of the old isometric Fallout games. I'm thinking like Fallout 1 and 2. It really sounds like a track you'd find in those. If you just changed some tiny elements, got rid of a little bit of the Isle-ness of it, it would fit in perfectly in those Fallout games. And that's part of what sort of turned me off to it, is that I immediately was thinking of other things, of other games that it kind of fits in a little bit better for. But it's not outright bad at all, it's just not that good. But it is the starting point for many successors which rank much higher. And topping off D tier, we have Day. Which is an interesting one, because most of the Day tracks are very happy, peaceful, enthusiastic and such, but this one takes a different approach. It's a very unsettling Day track. It really makes you think of a drought, is kind of the image that comes to mind to me. The female choir it has in the latter half, really good. Definitely brings this thing up a notch against its competition here in D tier. But once again, it's one of those older tracks like Carnivores that you can tell just the stride in the soundtrack was not there yet, so unfortunately it's down here. But it does have a successor later on. And alright, moving up to C tier. Now, C tier is where songs that are perfectly fine, but not remarkable go. These are the tracks that they have a job, they do it fine, they do the bare minimum, they get a passing grade, is really what everything in C tier is. There's nothing crazy or remarkable about them, but they get the job done, and you can't fault them for that. So we are starting off C tier with Something's Lurking. A nice little track, a very short track that just builds suspense. It's a very suspenseful track for what it is. It's really just like one string instrument, whatever. I don't know music or music theory. I'm not familiar with tons of instruments and such, but it's got one thing that's going just throughout the whole thing, and that's pretty much it. This is something that tiered the line between C tier and E tier, but it's just that little bit, it's got that little bit more, I'm a little bit biased towards it, I use it a little bit in my videos, that I decided, it deserves to be up here in C tier, but just barely. It's got a nice little suspenseful thing going for it, but extremely simple, so this is as high as it could possibly get. Up next we got something entirely different. Evrima track 16. Which is just the goofiest track in the entire soundtrack. That's the accolade I can give it. It's quite a funny little goofy theme. This is, you can imagine, like, Hipsies, Protoceratops, Avaceratops, little velociraptors, even like babies, like baby Dryos and such. Like that, you think of those when you hear this track. And while it's a nice little track, it has too many little pauses in it. It really doesn't fit with any of the other tracks. You know, it's a nice little reprieve from all, you know, the dark depression, melancholy, etc., of much of the other tracks. I just can't rate it any higher than C tier. Like, sure, it has this job of being a goofy little track, but it could be so much more if it was more consistent, if it didn't just like, oh, nothing bombastic, oh, nothing bombastic. That's really something that I do not like in tracks. And unfortunately, that lands it back here in C tier. Still a cute little track, regardless. Up next, we've got Evrima track 3. And this one, well, it's another very subtle ambient track. Ekes its way out from being in E tier because it does give you a little bit more to work with. It's got like these very sort of like whale noises, I think, in the background. It's got a little bit of radio static, and it's not quite all, you know, dark and dreary. It has a little bit of wonder in it, hidden down in it. For some reason, it's conjuring images of the coast, but more coastal human structures. Like, this would be something like in a lighthouse or docks. I could really see this theme coming out. Not bad by any means, actually pretty good. But because it is a very subtle track that doesn't really do much else, it's a very consistent little track, it sits here in C tier. Up next, we've got Irima Track 6. And this track, it's an unsettling one. It's got some chimes in it. It's got what feels like a I can't think of the word right now, but like the little nursery like thing that'll play music for like a baby. Like, it's got a little bit of that, but kind of distorted and like stops abruptly. It's a really unsettling little ambient track here. Like, the image it's conjuring in my mind is the compies in the crib in the Jurassic Park novel. And that was the first of many Jurassic Park comparisons, because, I mean, come on, it's the Isle. They wear their inspirations on their sleeves, so, and this track really makes me think of that scene. It's a very unsettling, foreboding track, definitely for human structures, I think, along with track 3. Overall, pretty good, but once again, it is mostly a very subtle ambient track, and as such, it ends up in C tier. And up next, we've got something completely different with The Journey. Now, this track has a lot of good stuff going for it, and a few bad things going for it at the same time. So for one thing, personally, I like this track a lot. The way it goes from the piano into the strings, and then you have the horns brought in as it just reaches this crescendo and it just keeps going. Like, it's a really uplifting track. Like, this is like a call to adventure. This is like, yeah. Like, it just makes you want to do something, go somewhere, which is kind of appropriate with the title like The Journey. But at the same time, whereas I could rate it in B tier, maybe even A, but it does clash with a lot of the rest of the soundtrack. I don't mean in terms of just the vibe and mood it sort of gives off, but it is very different from the rest of the soundtrack, and I think that does bring it down a little bit when comparing it with the rest. Like, it doesn't feel so much like an Isle track, but it is very good in its own right, enough for me to justify putting it up here in C, despite that shortcoming. Overall, it's a track that a lot of people haven't heard. That's why I had to find on a composer's website, and I like it. It is in a very weird spot, admittedly. Like, I don't really know where to place this thing, because it's so good, but it has such a big issue in terms of its composition compared to the rest of the soundtrack. But it is a solid pick for C tier. Up next, we've got Day 2.0. So the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. The song that was best of D tier ends up being the basis for a solid song in C tier. Day 2.0, the choir. The choir is really what carries the song. Pretty much all the things I said about Day over in D tier, it's just that, but the choir elevates it for sure. It just really does. Now, once again, it is a departure from the rest of the songs focused on daytime, which are usually very happy or relaxed, and this one has a bit more of an uneasy feeling to the day. Definitely makes me think of a drought. For some reason, that's the image that comes to mind whenever I hear this. Up next, we've got Evrima track 7. And this is a really good ambient theme. It's high up here in C tier. Love the radio sounds in it. The Morse code is a great touch. And even some groaning metal near the end. Like, that is some good human building, human structures, areas, ambience right there. Puts you in a bit of a state of unease, but there is that bit of mystery in there. Unfortunately, being a subtle ambient track, once again, ends up here in C tier because it can't really get much higher for what it is. Still a very solid pick for C tier. And up next, we've got a very similar track, Evrima track 8. Now this one is pretty much everything I said about track 7, except it uses instruments a bit more. It separates itself from ambience with the use of strings, and then at the end, the choir. The choir, once again, is something that just makes it. Towards the end, it gets a little bit of a choir, and that does so much to bring this up. Like, without that choir, I would be at a loss which of these two to put in front of the other, but with it, it goes to 8. Solid pick for C tier. And up next, we got what may be a controversial pick, the main theme, Old. Now this is a track, it's yet another one that is definitely, well, old. Along with Day and Carnivores, it definitely screams Old Isle to me. I was not around for Legacy Days. In fact, I have not been around for even half of Evrima's development, so I don't have any nostalgia towards this track, which would maybe make people rate it much higher. But it's a very basic track. It really is like an exemplification of C tier. It has a job to be a main theme of sorts for the game. Okay, does it do that job? Yeah. Does it do it well? Maybe. Is it spectacular at it? Nah. It definitely feels old. It feels like a placeholder in a way. But it has a solid beat to it. There's nothing to dislike about it, really. It's just something that's it's kind of stuck in time, which is perhaps appropriate to it. That it was before a few bits of the Isle's music identity seemed to be around, as far as I could tell. Or it's just something that was left behind as it was forming that identity. So it sits over here in C tier. Up next, we've got Survived Another Day. Now, this was found along with, like, Isle Intro and Soundtrack 1, but this one, it's something a little bit different. The few piano notes at the end, just, so good. It's a solid little track, but it is short. It is so short. In fact, it shares a lot of similarities with a couple of the, I believe it's the New Life tracks. It shares a lot of similarities with them. But because it's so short and so little, it's ranked much lower than those ones are, which is unfortunate. If it was something that was lengthened out, if it had more to it, it could be higher. But as it stands, fairly decent but extremely short track, so it's over here in C tier. Up next, we've got Rima track 4, Carnivores 1. So this Child of Carnivores gets a little bit higher, but yeah, I don't know what to say about Carnivores. Like, it's an improvement over the original. It's definitely an improvement, but not by all that much, really. It's a decent track. It has a job to be, spooky, carnivores around, ooh, like a little bit of terror in there. And it does that fine, but it's missing something, or perhaps, maybe the way you put it is it's got too much going on. Maybe it's trying just a little bit too hard, if that makes sense. And that is something I can say about the next track here, which is Rima track 5, Carnivores 2. I rate them right next to each other. They are extremely close together in terms of how they sound. And yeah, like they're definitely a level above the original. But for being proper music tracks, they really do leave something to be desired. They're missing some kind of spark to them. I don't really know what it is. But they don't capture any magic, I guess is the word to put it. A stupid way to put it, but that's just how I feel. And it's appropriate that these are at the top of C tier. They're songs that are decent, perfectly fine in their own right, but just don't have that extra little bit of pizzazz that would get them up into a higher tier. So they're stuck clawing at the ceiling of C tier. Now moving up to B tier. B tier is where we're putting songs that are pretty good. They're not in C tier because they're not just decent at what they do, but they're good at what they do. They have that little bit of something extra, like what Carnivores is missing. Basically, they're like the Carnivores tracks, but they have that little bit that's missing that makes them it makes you go, okay, you know what? Yeah, these are a little bit better. These definitely deserve to be in a tier just higher than C. Starting off at the bottom of B tier, we have Dinosaur Island. Now, this is a perfectly good track. It has really good build up, the sense of grandeur. It definitely fits the title of, a dinosaur island. And what that brings to mind, you can hear it in this track. This, once again, I'm repeating myself, just grandeur of these creatures, of this island. But it's held back a little bit by the horns, I think. I don't like the horns in this song. They, in my opinion, they clash with a lot of the rest of it. They overwhelm the rest of what's going on when they do show up, and they kind of just like throw you through a loop. And this is a song that, with a little bit of adjustment, without the horns, would be A tier, which this is spoilers for later, because it does have a successor that ranks higher. But unfortunately for it, the first iteration, it's sitting here in B tier. Up next, we've got Nightfall 1. It's a bit of the same category as intro, soundtrack 1, all of that good stuff. Where is it around here? I know I put it in here somewhere. Survived Another Day. Whereas this little track, you can only find it in one place, and it's pretty good. Like, this is what I mean by a track that is a subtle background track. It's supposed to be ambience more than anything, but instead of sitting here in C tier, like track 7 and 8 and such, and especially like Something's Lurking, it pushes itself up into B tier with the choir. Choirs, man, I am a sucker for choirs, okay? And they do a spectacular job in this song. Just pushing it up that little bit, making it this little bit more just, like, I mean, look at the title, Nightfall. Like, yeah, it's a bit foreboding, it's a bit spooky, it's, with the choir being a bit spooky, just, good track overall. Though, very short. If this thing was like a full-length track, if it had, ups and downs and such, it would maybe make its way into A tier. But for what it is, it's sitting here in B tier. And up next, we have New Life. Now, this is a good piece of music right here. I mean, immediately you're thinking of Juvies, you're thinking of fresh spawns, baby dinos in a nest, you're thinking of all that. The harp in this thing is beautiful. And the piano notes at the end, I believe, are the same ones as in Survive Another Day. Just, like, they're the perfect send-off. Like, this makes you think of small little creatures full of wonder of the world around them. It's just perfect for what it is, which is a song for Juvies. And up next, we've got New Life 2. And this, it just takes everything that New Life did and did it better. Minus the harp. The harp takes a back seat in here. But just, oh, the string instruments. I think there's some wind, something, flute. I don't know music all that well, okay? Despite me doing a tier list over it, I just enjoy it. The way it builds up, it's a little bit more grand than New Life 1. It's just got that little bit more going for it. That little bit more that makes it a definite improvement over New Life 1. Everything I said about New Life 1 can be attributed to this one, and then more. It just takes what it did and did it better. Solid B tier. And up next, we've got Herbivores. Now this is a grand little track. Whenever you listen to this, instantly your mind goes to a herd of herbivores. You're thinking, big things. You got stegos, trikes, sauropods and such, hadrosaurs like Maya, Shant. Just all of them just move into a herd. You've got the drums, you've got the horns, just it all builds up beautifully. It is a very nice little track here. There's not much else to say about it, it's just a solid B tier track. Up next we've got Evrima Track 11, Fight 2. Now this one, okay, it sounds straight out of God of War. You can't tell me at the beginning parts, it doesn't sound like you're Kratos just taking down some kind of mythological beast. Just, geez, that thing is bombastic. And while a decent track overall, it's a good track, it definitely has a bit of, grandness in this fight, and you feel there's a big struggle going on. It's a little bit much for its own good. I think that's the reason it's down in B tier and not higher. It's another one that, much like the Arima Carnivore tracks, it feels like it's trying too hard. If that makes any sort of sense. It just feels like it's trying to be too much in the moment, and it's not really earning the bombasticness. As a fight track, it's a little bit short for actual game combat. If you had this playing in-game, it would be... I don't really know exactly how it would fit in-game, and that's part of why it's down in B and not A, is that there's a little confusion on there because it's somewhat short for a fight theme. It doesn't really have an obvious loop points and such. And up next we've got, the last track's brother, Evrima Track 10, Fight 1. Fight? More like flight. This is the epitome of panic. It is such a frantic track, which I do like about it. That's why it's up here. It is such a good, frantic, oh crap, I'm going to die kind of soundtrack. Just the I'm not even gonna try to imitate the sounds because it's gonna be awful. But just the way you have just way it's constantly pushing you forward. I think that's something the song does really well. Is it's pushing you, it's saying go, 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 go constantly. And yeah, that's why it's up here, is that it definitely has a lot of emotion to it. But similar to Fight 2, it's just too bombastic for its own good. It's over very quickly, and in the same way I can say it 2 tries a bit too hard. It doesn't really have a build-up. It starts out, it starts out at 11, and it doesn't let up. And that's unfortunately a bit of a downside for it, and why it's here in B tier. Up next we've got something much more calming than those two, which is Juvenile. And this track, it's just a lovely little piece for, well, juveniles, juvies. It's much in the same vein as New Life 1 and 2. It really makes you think of baby dinosaurs roaming about, doing their thing, just living their little lives. It's that moment of calm, of respite, of, there's nothing crazy going on, it's fine, you're safe. The little horn or flute, probably a horn or something that's got in it, just, fantastic. Just how it kicks up about halfway through and brings the song just through the rest of it, just wonderful. Wonderful little track. Now going back to the other end of the spectrum, we've got Deadly Secrets / Twilight. I've seen this song in 2 different spots, and it was titled 2 different things, so here we are. So yeah, that is a very spooky little ambient track. The image this brings to mind is, I imagine like a security guard or someone looking at a security feed, and there's some messed up stuff going on the feed. This guy's just trying to look at a little trail cam, and he's like, oh look, a little Herrerasaurus, and then a freaking Gen 1 shows up and just like does something crazy. Like that's the imagery that comes to mind is, well, Deadly Secrets. It's like there's like those little beats in it, those little thumps, like something's trying to break out or break in, the little bit of sort of I want to call it like glitchy, buggy kind of sounds in there, which just really ramps up the unease that this song gives, and is a big reason why it is this high. Like, this is just straight up unsettling, and that's what secures its spot in B tier. Up next, we've got one whose picture is all messed up right now, but that's fine, which is Observation / Terrifying Night. Once again, I found this twice under 2 different names, so I just put them together. So this one, another bit of creepy night ambience, very foreboding. And you know what this is? This track right here is what 13 wants to be, or at least should be. Maybe 13 doesn't want to be this, and that's its mistake. Because this is just a track that makes perfect sense why this would be called Terrifying Night. This is something that is just, there's big things lurking in the darkness. You have just the music builds up to its little crescendo, and then afterwards you get this little bit with the, I can't tell if it's like a really light like harp or piano bit afterwards, which makes me think of just some small creature trying to skitter away from whatever large thing that this track is following, if that makes any sense. Very good track, really sets the scene, sets the exact kind of mood that it wants, executes it flawlessly, and that's why it's here in B tier. And up next we've got Irima Track 2. Now this is something different, and I'll do a little bit of a spoiler. It is basically the Hope theme. Irima Track 1, Hope. It is really just that theme, but only a part of it, and a little bit different. It is different, it's not just taken straight from Hope, but it's very similar, and as such kind of lacks its own identity really. It's a bit of a more subtle version of Hope. Now, I'll give it that. Overall, just to say the good stuff about it, it has that very well hopeful kind of connotation to it. The sense of wonder and majesty is really what this brings out. And yeah, it's about as much as I can really say for it, because the actual Hope theme just blows it out of the water, so I'll save all of my gushing over that theme for later. But as for Irima Track 2, as a result of being overshadowed by Hope, it just gets to sit here very high in B tier. And up next we've got Night. And Night is one of those ambient themes, once again, very fitting for Night, very foreboding. It's got the choir doing some heavy lifting, and towards the end it moves from this deep male choir to a bit more, I want to say it becomes a child choir. It doesn't quite become like a woman choir, it's not like that high-pitched, it's more, well, it goes from like the deep men's like, oh, to like a child's like, oh, like that. Probably did a horrible job right there, but overall, very good track. It really reaches up and away from the ambient tracks of C tier, being very up far here in B tier, though there's some tracks that go along with it that have gotten a bit higher. But yeah, it really builds this uneasy atmosphere. It does a great job of it, and that's why it's up here. Now moving on to A tier. A tier is where the songs that I think are exceptional go. Not quite an S tier. They're not just absolutely fantastic, blowing everything out of the water, iconic, whatever. These are the songs that are one step above B tier. So C tier was just, okay, it's a song, it has a job, it does it fine. B is okay, song has a job, does it well. And then A tier is this thing excelled at doing exactly what it was meant to do. There's not really a missed opportunity in here. There's not really the, it would have been so much better if these little bits were tweaked about. These are fantastic. And starting off A tier, we have Primitives. Now it's a good one. It's great. You've got that tribal kind of feel, you got the flute or whatever it is going in, you have the low chanting followed by the more punctuated, like, whoa, chanting. You've got little bits of drum, though, it's not going crazy with the drums. It's very restrained. And I think that's part of what I like about it, is a track that knows to restrain itself. And despite having little bits of punctuation and bits of calm throughout it, it's still good despite that. It's not like the ones that, I believe it was track 16, right, it's got bits of punctuation and then bits of nothing, but it fills up the bits of nothing. Primitives fills it up with just a little bit of constant background stuff going on, and it avoids all of the pitfalls that this track had. Very good piece of music. I like to use it in my videos for combat whenever it's very slow going, very methodical, and I think that's a good word for this song. It's very methodical, the way that each element is used in it. And up next, we've got Evening. And this track, well, it's a fantastic ambient piece. And Evening, that is the correct title. It is very foreboding, that's a word I'm using a lot. But it is a track that's just, fills you with apprehension of what's to come. The choir does quite a bit of heavy lifting here, and it really adds to that feeling of, is there a little bit of otherworldliness in it? I think there's a little bit of that, of a kind of, it adds a little bit of an ancient feeling, but a little bit like you're not really supposed to be here, if that makes any sense. I'm trying to extrapolate from it. It's just good. It's just straight up good. There's quite a few ambient bits up here in A tier that are just like, yes, this is fantastic ambience. This is what I want in the background all the time when I'm playing. And these are what really build the atmosphere that this game has and that it's going for. Just fantastic track. And up next we've got Morning. Now, Morning, I don't even know what instrument is used to make that really distinctive noise you get towards like the beginning and middle of it, but that is everything. It has a little bit of a female choir at one point. It's got a little bit of a, I don't know if it's like a horn or flute or something near the end that's pretty good, but whatever that noise is towards the beginning, that makes this song. That fills you with the feeling of, it's a feeling of relief, which I think is appropriate for Morning. Evening is very foreboding. All the songs related to night are about fear, terror, and morning is just this release, this, I'm alive. I'm gonna make it. The Dylos are going to sleep. I can see again. Things are fine. I'm fine. That's kind of the feeling it gives you. It's this whole feeling of relief, of just, yeah, that's all I can really say about it. Fantastic ambient track. Well deserving of A tier. And up next, after an evening and a morning, is very appropriately another evening, Evening 2.0. Now, this takes what Evening did and just did it better. I don't know what the sound is. I'm saying that so much now. It's very unfortunate, but like that really high-pitched sound that you have towards the beginning just adds so much to it, adds this layer that you didn't know you needed in the Evening. And then the choir, the very deep male choir, it a little bit makes me think of like monastic chanting almost, especially towards the end. It really digs into that foreboding feeling that the original Evening had, but just amps it up and makes it even more, you're even more apprehensive of what's to come because of it. Just, yeah, everything I said about Evening, but just amped up in this one. So good. And up next, continuing the theme of times of the day, we have Dawn. And this is like the evil brother of morning, because they're both representing the same time of day, but Dawn has a bit more wariness to it. It's a bit more... It's apprehensive about the day to come is the thing. Morning is the, yes, I've made it, I've survived another day. Meanwhile, Dawn is still remembering what Evening was so scared about. It's less of the, yay, I lived, and more of the, I had to fight for my life versus some Dylos. I'm straight up not having a good time. I'm half dead by the time the sun came up. And it really, gets that feeling coming out of you. Now, it's got a very good choir. It starts out with the female choir, but then towards the end, you get a bit of the male choir as well overlapping, which just, that's good. I mean, I'm a sucker for choirs, but I am so much more a sucker for choirs overlapping. It is just, yeah, fantastic, amazing bit of the soundtrack right here. And up next, we have the high water mark of the Carnivores, which is Carnivores 2.0. Now, this track right here is what Carnivores 2 and 1 over here in the Arima soundtrack want to be. These are Daniel, this is the cooler Daniel, okay? This, it has the foreboding feeling that Carnivores is trying to go for, but it really builds on it. It takes what Carnivores did and turns it up exactly where it needs to be. It's not trying too hard, it respects you. It gets into the emotions it's trying to make you feel at the perfect pace. It has a really good bit I like is where you have the, I don't even know if I call it the choir really, but the oh, like the male voice that gets like deeper and deeper, like that just like that is such a good part of it. But also one detail I love about Carnivores 2.0 is the little light like high-pitched bits, the little like doo-doo-doo or doo-doo-doo bits, because what those make me think of, it's some little creature trying to escape. It's that flightiness, that, you know, getting out of there. It's like this track is, there's a carnivore, there is something menacing around, and it's on the prowl, and the little high-pitched bits are whatever it's hunting. That's the prey, trying to escape, trying to survive. It's just these little, just, the fact that it has this predator-prey dynamic in the song, awesome. It's straight up awesome. Like this, as I said before, it's the high water mark of Carnivores. This is the full potential of the Carnivores track realized, all the way up here in A tier. And up next, we've got Evrima Track 1, Hope Theme. This one, well, I already talked about it a little bit in the Evrima Track 2, but the title is appropriate. Like, you listen to this song, you hear hope, you hear wonder, like, just astonishment. Like, this is a theme that really is, you're seeing dinosaurs, living, breathing dinosaurs for the first time. It's the ooh, ah, that's how it always starts. That's what this track is. And, well, just like that quote I'm taking from, the ooh, ah, that's how it starts, but then there's the running and the screaming. That's how this track goes. On the latter half, it suddenly cuts off and becomes this really sort of uneasy ambient drone that really, it's a bit mysterious, it's a bit like, ooh, especially after you just had a very uplifting, hopeful theme. It suddenly transitions into, ooh, a bit dark, mysterious, you know, things aren't as they seem. And I can appreciate that. I can appreciate a track doing that, and that's definitely something that takes it far above track 2, is that end bit being like that, and the kind of story that that tells. But it's not up in S tier. As much as this is a popular track, a lot of people give it praise, it sort of doesn't fit with much of the rest of the soundtrack. It's sort of its own little thing, but I can appreciate it for what it is. It definitely belongs up here in A tier, but it really does not reach into S. Up next, we've got another fan favorite, 1000 Life Contract. Now this one, okay, it starts out strong with just the descending male vocal. Love that. Does that a couple times. Then it really picks up. Got the piano, but then you have a bit of chanting, sort of tribal chanting that happens, which is then contrasted by the sudden addition of this very electronic sound, very fast-paced electronic sound, which is also very uneasy. It's a very much, I mean, like, the way it just goes do 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 do, like, it's telling you to get out, is what it's telling you. It's telling you, get out of here, like, something bad's happening, something wrong is what's going on here. And that is collaborated by, at the very end, when things cut out, you have the piano, just some lone notes, along with, I believe it's like some violins, very creepy, like, string instruments going on there. Just outstanding track. The title itself is very interesting because, I mean, I'm sure there's some deep lore significance to it, something, which a lot of other tracks don't have so much of. But yeah, overall, great track. And you know what? Right now is a good time for me, I think. So, okay, when it comes to music, I'm a sucker for choirs and such, but I am a much larger sucker for motifs, leitmotifs, all that stuff. I am such a sucker for that. And I believe on a couple of the, I mean, it was like evening, dawn might have had it, maybe morning, but I forget. Like, some of these songs, a lot of the Isle soundtrack shares a motif, and that motif is at the end of Thousand Life Contract, very distinctly by itself. It's the dun 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 kind of sound. Like, when you've been listening to all these tracks all day, like I have, like, listened to all of them like 3 times now, you catch on. Some of them have that motif in them, either at the end or it's got it. I believe New Life 1 and 2, I think, have that at the end. It's got like 5 piano notes, and they're the same that correspond to what's at the end of this. Which, now that I'm thinking about the fact that New Life 1 and 2 have, I mean, these like very nice, lovely themes, have those 5 notes, the motif of the Isle, as far as I can tell, at the end as 5 individual piano notes, and Thousand Life Contract, which is very much an opposite theme, that is very much something terrible is happening, and like awful, get out of here, and it's very creepy at the end, also has 5 notes that go in the same kind of, like, I'm not a music expert, it's not like the exact same note, but they like ascend and descend in the same way. So that's maybe something. That's maybe some musical storytelling going on between those 2 tracks. But yeah, as this goes on, listen, you will hear that theme come back a few times. I think I missed it in a couple of earlier things, unfortunately. I was meaning to point that out, but yeah. Just, I am a huge sucker for motifs, and that's why stuff in higher tiers tends to have motifs, because I love them. Okay, up next we've got New Acts of God. Now, this is a variation of Acts of God, and I'm going to be a bit brief with it, because, I mean, spoilers, Acts of God is an S tier, and I will go much more into detail there. But yeah, just in general, very hopeful song. What I like about it is, while being a very hopeful track, It also has a little bit of struggle in there. It definitely has a bit of a different vibe than the original Acts of God, in that it's more hopeful. It's not quite happy. It's more just hopeful, which there is a distinction between those two. But it's a hopeful in a very struggling manner. Like, the song has little builds up and then it falls down, and then it builds up and falls down again. And it's kind of got this little bit of perseverance, I guess is the word to use. Very good track, it stands out. I like it a lot. But yeah, that's all I'm gonna talk about it, because the original Acts of God, I'm gonna be talking about that for quite a while when I get to it. And up next, we've got Laboratories. It is a very eerie, ethereal. That's the word I'm looking for. It has an ethereal feel to it. The child choir, once again coming back, and I think this is the most prominent one of those is in here. And it fits the title, Laboratories. Like, I think of this theme, I listen to this theme, and you know what I'm thinking of? The engine facility from Jurassic Park 3. When they're walking through, seeing all the, test tubes and vats with embryos in them, that's what I'm thinking of when I hear this. It's, it's something that would play in wherever the dinosaurs are made. And actually, if I'm going off my very limited knowledge of, Isle lore, there's this thing called the Replicator, which makes the dinosaurs. It's some, machine or something. This is the theme of the Replicator. This is the theme that plays when you enter the room with it. It has this feeling of hollowed ground. That's what I'm talking about with the ethereal feel. It's you've entered this, holy place where a miracle has been performed. But at the same time, there's a little bit of sadness, a little bit of melancholy underlining it all. There's a bit of sadness, the event, the incident that took all the people out, and now this place is abandoned. This place that was once doing wonders now sits dilapidated. You get a little bit of that vibe. I'm just conjuring this whole image from this music, and because this music does conjure such a strong mental image, it's just a really good track at painting a picture in your mind. And that's why it's up here very high in A tier. And now we get Welcome to the Isle 2, which is not the actual title of the song. This one has a weird thing going on with it. Okay, so it's on the website of a composer under the title Welcome to the Isle. But there is another song by the same composer that I found on YouTube, on what I believe to be an old official Isle YouTube channel, that is also titled Welcome to the Isle. These are entirely different songs, okay? But Welcome to the Isle 2 is actually the latter half of a piece that's just titled Main Theme Music. So it's really, I debated if I should have this track on this list or not, because it's technically just part of another one, but the fact that it's cited as its own track on that website made me go, screw it, we'll put it in here. So here it is, Welcome to the Isle 2-ish, maybe. Okay, wow. That was awesome. That was just straight up awesome. This would be S tier. Okay, it would be S tier if not for the fact that it's part of another song and it would feel unfair to put it in S tier. Just, I mean, where do I even begin? You have the female choir going on, you got the male chanting, the tribal kind of chanting, the drums going, and it just builds up. I mean, the drums are just fantastic throughout the whole thing, but then it builds up and you just get this crescendo where you get the leitmotif. You get the leitmotif of the aisle. The dun, 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 dun. Like, just, good. It's great. It's fantastic. If you watch my videos, you might have noticed I use this for combat music. It actually has an incredibly good loop point in this song where you can just loop it back into itself perfectly fine. Like, man, Battle Music 1. Poor Battle Music 1. How garbage you are when something like this exists. And isn't combat music, sadly. Just, I am gushing over this song so much. It's awesome. It's great. It's fan-freaking-tastic. You love to see it. That's why it's up here. Like, this should be the standard of combat music. This right here. Alright, next up we've got a double feature of Day Comes and Day Ends, which these are practically the same song, but done very differently, some different instruments. Just give them a listen. Just, wow. I mean, yeah, they're up here. I love these songs. Just the little build-up they have, that when it reaches the crescendo with the tiny bit of the drum, you got the flute or whatever the heck it is playing throughout it. Just that little bit at the end, just, ah! Man, I wish I was better at describing music, because just, I mean, you listen to it, you know what I'm talking about. And then Day Ends, it's a bit subtler than Day Comes. It's quite a bit quieter, it has the harp, it really relies on the harp a lot more. They're just comfy. These are such comfy songs. Like happy, comfy, just like Day Ends especially. I can envision in my mind just the little, baby dinosaur like curling up and going to sleep. Day Ends is like the one track for nighttime, like for going into night, that's actually not horrific and awful and you're gonna die. It's just very calming, soothing, you're having sweet dreams, just I love it. I love these two so much. Absolutely fantastic pieces of the soundtrack. And they deserve to be really freaking high up here. And up next we've got Dinosaur Island 2.0. yeah, just wow. Okay, Dinosaur Island, you were teetering on C tier. Okay, you just barely clawed your way up here. Dinosaur Island 2 just went and did everything you did, but 100 times better. Okay, so good. Everything good about Dinosaur Island at the beginning here. The sense of wonder, the grandeur, the sense of scale. I mean, you imagine a massive, like, herbivore herd to this music. But not only that, it takes the worst element of Dinosaur Island, the trumpets that just decide to go insane and overpower the song. It tells them to shut up and get in line and enhance the song rather than overwhelm the rest of it. And they do. You hear a little bit of them as the build-up happens, and it's great. You have the choir, which, of course, as I've stated many times now, I'm a sucker for choirs, and they bring anything just up, sometimes up a tier just alone. But the choir is fantastic, but then the bits that's just the piece of resistance, like, the part that makes it go right near the top of A tier is the bit where it sort of like collapses down and you have just the deeper horns and the rest of it just like there's a sense of struggle. Suddenly, like, you get to this point, it builds up, then it falls, and there's this real sense of struggle, and once again, perseverance is really this thing you feel through that part of it. And that part alone rises it up so much. Just, I love it when a song can have peaks, and then this valley, and then it climbs its way back up again, just, It's good, it's fantastic, I love it. Awesome. Awesome piece of the soundtrack. You love to hear it. Like, I'm gonna stop gushing over it and get to the next one. And up next, we've got Peaceful Day. Yeah, just, it goes up here. Of all of the songs about day, night, dawn, dusk, evening, blah blah blah, whatever, Peaceful Day is just the quintessential, the title is perfectly correct. Peaceful Day, that's exactly what this song is. Like, this is a song that does exactly what it's supposed to do to perfection. This thing just, it's just so nice. It's so lovely to listen to. This is the peaceful day. You're just roaming around. You're walking around, doing your thing, living your life. Everything's fine. You know, the sun's out. You're just chilling. You're just vibing. I use this in just about all my videos. Just about all of them. The intro is Peaceful Day. It's just such a good little theme. It's not loud or bombastic or anything. It's very subtle, but in such a good way. It enhances the moment so much by just being in the background, not overwhelming everything. Just, it knows what it is, and it will do exactly what it's supposed to without fail. Just a beautiful piece of music. Belongs right up at the top of A tier. This thing's bordering on S. This thing... I debated if it was going in S tier or A tier, but it's seen here capping off A tier very strongly. And now here we are, up in S tier. The best of the best. The songs that define the soundscape of the game or just outstanding on their own merits. And to start off, we have Arima Track 17, Music Box theme. But before I start that, I will say a lot of these tracks are actually really long. So, for S tier alone, I will give a minute of the song rather than 30 seconds that I've been giving to everything else so far, so that you don't miss out on anything. Just, yeah. Music Box theme, S tier. Of all of the very subtle ambient tracks, I mean, there's so many that sit down there in C tier. There's quite a few that go up to A tier as well, but this one paints such an image in your mind. It's so different in terms of the music used, and that's a music box. Just, I might be insane, but I think it uses a bit of the motifs from Acts of God. I think it sort of follows some similar stuff there, but it does more than just be a music box scene, but it has that little bit where you get a little bit of a build-up that then falls down and goes on. Just, it's a very sad theme. That's one thing. If there's a word to describe this theme, it's melancholy. It has a very particular sadness to it. Like, I listen to this theme and I imagine the workers' village for the people that lived on the island and built all the stuff that made the dinosaurs. Like, this would be playing in some Human Structure. I believe it, yeah, used to play in some Human Structures. I don't know if it does now. I normally have the music turned off so I can insert my own in videos and such, and because the combat music is so awful. But yeah, the music box theme, it just makes me think of like a little dinosaur running around in an old dilapidated house, and you have like pictures of the family that lived there, and you have the toys or whatever of a child that lived there, and this sense of loss. It's this palpable feeling that something was lost. There was once something here that will never return, and things will never be as they once were. And just, I love it. I love it so much. Is the reason why, like, I'm biased towards this thing, okay? I am very much biased towards it. That's why it's up in S tier. This thing, on another person's list, would probably be sitting high in A tier, but for me, this is peak subtle ambience music, okay? All the subtle ambient tracks, this is what they aspire to be, and what pretty much none of them will obtain. Just, so good. Just fantastic theme that really digs into those sad, melancholic tones that the game wants to have around Human Structures. Up next we have an interesting one, Tyrannic. Now, disclaimer, I don't actually know if this is an official Isles soundtrack or if it's a fan piece, because the guy that made it, Patrick Maney, he has a few tracks on his SoundCloud that I found, which are Isle related, but none of them fit with the Isle. They're all very out there and different and don't fit the game whatsoever. Like, you think the journey is a little bit out there, doesn't really fit the Isle. He has some songs that really do not mesh at all with the rest of the soundtrack. Not that they're bad, they're actually pretty freaking good. But this track, which it's not even on his SoundCloud, strangely, it exists on one YouTube video I can find, which links to the SoundCloud, but apparently this isn't there. but apparently this was main menu music at some point. So I've decided to take people's word for it because it's so good that I thought it was an official piece of the soundtrack. Like, I thought 100% that, oh yeah, this is obviously official soundtrack. But it's like, wait, no, it's not? Or it's maybe not? I don't know. So yeah, without any further ado, here it is. So yeah, this is the Dark Souls boss music. Just, whew, where do I even begin? One, the build-up, the just dread. That's the word, just the dread of the build-up with these deep tones. And then it finally builds up and you get the beginning of the choir, which is equally dreadful in a good way. Of just this really deep, oh, it's just, there's a monster. Like, this isn't just, there's a Rex. Like, there's a hyper-endocrine freaking Rex after you, is what this music is. But then it really builds up, and it just starts going ham. You get the tribal chanting, you've got strings being plucked, like the do-do-do-do-do. And then you get into the meat of it where you've got like two sticks clacking together and the rest of the song sort of fades out for a moment. Just, oh, so good. And it just keeps building up again. You have the even more epic chanting, like the epic. That's the word for this music. Just epic is the word to describe Tyrannic. Like, this is the fight between a freaking Hyper Rex and a Hyper Spino Giga whatever. Like, this is just this is the final boss music. This is, I can't, like, there's nothing more I can say. The song explains itself. It is just so good. It's so good that despite possibly not even being an official track, it's on here. Like, if it wasn't so spectacular, I probably wouldn't have included it, just for safety, but screw it. It's so good it gets to be up here regardless. Just, awesome. Yeah, that's another word for it. Awesome. That's the word for Tyrannic as well, and don't forget it. And up next, we have Acts of God. Yep, another absolute banger. Just, I mean, you take the melancholic stuff from the Music Box theme and just, like, it is a song, it has so many emotions wrapped up in it. it's got a bit of that wonder, a bit of that just wow, amazement. But then it's tempered. It's tempered by a kind of sadness. This melancholy feel that really comes in whenever the piano leaves for a moment. The strings really pick up whenever it sort of drops off for a second. And of course the piano comes back. But just, the bit where the piano gets to be by itself and play the notes, and throughout the whole thing, you have the Isles motif throughout it. The dun 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 dun. Though it goes on to 6 notes in some parts there, but just throughout the whole thing, you get that it is full of the motif, and I love it so much. Like, if I'm trying to get some more out of it, tragedy, that's the word, it's a very tragic song, isn't it? Because, like, you look at the title, Acts of God, which of course is obviously referring to people playing God, making dinosaurs, disrupting the natural order, genetic modification, etc., etc. I mean, all the classic Jurassic Park quandaries with cloning extinct creatures. But there's a little bit of the tragedy of these creatures taken out of time, living millions of years away from when they should be, and living in this strange, unfamiliar world, left to fend for themselves, to live and die, and it's a bit tragic, but at the same time, the Acts of God title, you can also have it refer to the dinosaurs living and persevering. Here's me using that word again, using perseverance a lot. But stay with me, in that you have humans trying to... I'm possibly reading too deep into it, but you have the humans trying to play God, making these dinosaurs, and, well, with like what little bit of lore I know, like, the company that made the dinosaurs wasn't interested in making, a theme park out of them, but making like pharmaceuticals or whatever. So, breeding these creatures just so that they could make money doing pharmaceuticals, whatever, playing God with genetic modification. But you have the dinosaurs break free. But not only do they break free, they survive and thrive in spite of their circumstances. And the act of God is not man creating the dinosaurs, but the dinosaurs outliving man, and doing simply as nature intended, surviving. I probably read into it way too much right there, but just, yeah. I mean, this song inspires me to overthink it that much. Like, that's why it's so good. That's why it is S tier. It is a solid S tier song. Absolutely fantastic. And alright, the next two, they are neck and neck. They're practically interchangeable. I spent probably a solid 15-20 minutes just listening to both back-to-back, trying to decide which one I liked more. And the one that's going up here first is the main theme music. Just, yeah, it's awesome. It is fantastic. It starts off strong with the horns, and then you get into it with just the drums go crazy, you have the choir going crazy, you have the main motif, I mean the Isle motif right there, doing its thing, being awesome. But then, right after the first crescendo and it goes on for a little bit, then it drops down. Like, there's probably a phrase for that. There's probably some sort of musical phrase for that, but I just don't know. But, it goes down, and that's when you get the female choir comes in as it builds itself back up, and once again, perseverance is the word that comes to mind. Like, it starts off strong, falls down, gets back up again, just continues and builds right back up to its former glory, and and that's not to mention the fact that, like, the last third of it is the Welcome to the Isle 2 bit, which is fantastic in and of itself. So it's like a 2-for-1 deal we've got going on here. It's so good. It is like, yeah, you listen to this and you go, yeah, that's main theme music. That's suitably bombastic, epic, when it needs to be. Like, I got mad at some tracks earlier for being too bombastic or, like, trying too hard. But it's because these are just normal in-game tracks that shouldn't be trying that. Meanwhile, these ones, they go hard and they are supposed to go hard. As the main theme music, it uses the main motif of the game. The dun, 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 dun. And then you can maybe add the 6th dun in there. But just, I mean, the choir does that throughout the whole thing. The male choir, at least. Just, so good. Like, man, it's feeling a bit short compared to my analysis of Acts of God, but just, yeah, what's there to say? It's an awesome main theme music. And alright, last but certainly not least, we have Welcome to the Isle. Which, this one, just, yeah. This is a song that earns its build-up. It starts off with this really... It has this little bit of wonder going on with it. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Hope theme, though it's more on the harps at the beginning. But then it transitions from this sort of... wonder, but also sadness as the choir comes in. But then after that, like, the drums kick in, the choir, the chanting kicks in. And the interesting thing is it goes with this, like, forward drum beat, this dun-dun-dun-dun kind of deal instead of the main motif. So the main motif is in there. It's a bit more hidden because of the drum beats, but it's in there. But it's not really the main focus of this theme, which is a bit of a crime on its behalf, but I mean, these two are neck and neck. Every time I think about the main theme and Welcome to the Isle, I'm switching them, so this is just, I put my foot down and said this is the final judgment of both of them. But just, yeah, it builds up, and then you have the strings doing the like, just rising up, and just... Oh, it's so good! Like, really, it's just an epic theme. It has really good build-up, extremely good payoff. It even has, once it sort of calms down a bit, it then has a second, smaller little hill, and it handles that wonderfully. Just, yeah, once again, I feel like I'm not talking about it enough, but they kind of speak for themselves, you know? The main theme music, Welcome to the Isle, they speak for themselves a lot. Like, there's not much I can really say about them. I think they're both main theme music, really. And that's what main theme music tends to do. It sets the identity of, okay, what's the vibe, what's the overall message, the musical language going on here, the motifs that you're gonna hear throughout the other tracks. Just, so good. And there you have it. OBS is telling me I've been recording for 2 hours and 40 minutes. That's not true, that's not possible. That's just, nah. Oh, jeez. Yep, that's the Isle music tier list, all 51 tracks that I could find. I mean, if I've got some finishing thoughts to put out there, the soundtrack's great. Like, the Isle has a really good soundtrack. Yeah, such a good soundtrack with such variety. And while it has some outliers, it has some very strong motifs throughout the tracks, and some interesting through lines, and just the stories that can be told by some of these tracks and the connections that some have. I mean, like, the whole connection between Thousand Life Contract and New Life, I hadn't really thought of that before until I noticed those last few notes and I was talking about the motifs. Just, there's such synergy with a lot of these tracks, and like the Isle, it's going for being this brutal survival game with this horror elements, lots of fear, dread. Think the novel for Jurassic Park, like, you know, turning that up to 11, the horror elements of cloning dinosaurs and having all this stuff happen as a result. Just, yeah. Awesome soundtrack, severely underrated, and please, Afterthought, release like a full album of them or something. Like, I know for a fact that there are tracks I don't have on here because we've only ever heard them on dev streams and nobody got a clip of the stream, so we just straight up don't have that music and nobody, like, can listen to it. Like, I know you're making new themes and you like to release stuff, little bits and pieces, that's cool and all, but man, this soundtrack's so good. I want it all in one neat package, please. Just, yeah, I my brain is fried. I'm done gushing over the soundtrack. I've been here for like nearly 3 hours. If you've made it up to this point watching all of my rambling about this, what do you think about the tier list? Anything crazy out of place? Are you gonna crucify me for not putting something in S tier? Yeah, leave a comment. And that's it. Thanks for watching. See ya.